Hello and welcome, this is Alchemist X. So I'm going to be once again talking about Sword of Convallaria. Last time I made a video on it, the game was still fairly new. Now it's been out for almost 3 months. So I have a slightly better perspective just on the game as a whole as far as the core gameplay loop, resources, all of that. I'm also going to showcase my roles for Saffiyah just because I've been looking forward to her pretty much since the game came out. I'll showcase my account in general and just talk about certain other things like say the gacha, resources, etc. just from the perspective of somebody who is a fan of tactical RPGs. Presumably, if you're on my channel, more likely than not somebody coming from Tagatame. And then in addition, we could consider this a part 1 to a video that I will do later on. Once Tagatame server closes properly, we can make another video about, now that that game is done. I don't know if my channel is going to focus as hard on Sword of Convallaria as it did on Tagatame. I'm not sure if the material is really there for that, but we'll see. I will say that I definitely enjoy this game quite a bit, and while I can't consider myself an expert in the same level, just because when I started making videos on Alchemist Code / Tagatame, I had already been playing the game for quite a long time and was a lot more familiar. And then I was also more familiar with what the JP side of thing was doing at the time whilst playing global. Well, as here I hear the occasional rumors. I look on Reddit sometimes about what's going on overseas for Sword of Convallaria, but I'm not familiar quite in the same way. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the rolling for Saffiyah. Okay, so let's get started on the roll. So just right out the bat, these are going to be pretty good experience overall. It's like not the best case scenario, technically speaking, not the luckiest I've ever been in the game so far. I can talk about that in between noteworthy pulls, but overall I'm pleased with the result. As far as the pity goes, the max you could go is 180. I'm sitting closer to 130. There's other characters in the past that I rolled on them like non-committally. I figured if I got a super early good, if not, then just don't worry about it and save the guarantee for Saffiyah, but I was very much hoping that I wouldn't have to get that far. So for the first 5-star of the pulls, we got Inanna. So we lost the 50-50, but I don't consider this a loss. Of any character I could have lost it to is pretty much the best case scenario. She's a universal support and she's got an overclock, and unlike Tagatame where it's a fairly easy thing to accomplish, in this game getting an extra turn is very, very rare. And then she also summons an extra dude, so really can't go wrong with Inanna. So that she's definitely a character that I will be raising. Certainly worth the extra gems that it costs. So the standard rate for getting a 5-star, not like the 5-star, is 2%, which is very, very nice. The downside to this is that you're never guaranteed. Like, you can never have a guarantee aside from like the hard pity. So it is possible you might have to go like 180 without seeing the character. That's like the worst. The worst case scenario is very, very bad. But I'd say like the median experience is better than other games that I've talked about in the past, if that makes any sense. But luckily, it did not take very long to get another 5-star, and in this case, it is Saffiyah, so we don't have to do any more. So overall, very, very good experience. I ended up getting pretty much the last non-limited character that I wanted to get, or a character that was available from the start, because once a debut banner is over, the character is no longer limited. I'll talk more about the banners and my thoughts on them in detail later on. After this, we'll go into showcasing my account. There's going to be a bit of a time skip between here and there because I want to just raise Saffiyah and Inanna and use them as soon as I possibly can. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at where my account is right now. Okay, so for this next part, I was going to be going over my account, and I thought a good way to do that was just to showcase what the process is like as far as just like doing the dailies and how that gameplay loop works. So I'm just getting logged in here, and then it'll do like the login bonus. And there's also an event going on right now with the guild. Cool, just a few little coins. Generally speaking, there's usually quite a bit going on. I've heard people say there's nothing to do in the game, and I have not found that to be true. I'm not somebody who's racing towards the finish line. I'm just more kind of jogging. This event is something you do with your guild where you try to figure out a 5-digit number. I brute forced it one time. I'm not going to do that right now, otherwise we'll be here for way too long. The reset happened like a minute ago at the time of this recording, so the odds of somebody else in the guild having figured it out seems very low. So that's just something we'll get back to later. So in this game, one of the more noteworthy things that, if you're coming from Tagatame, it's not going to seem that special, but if you're coming from any other gacha game, the farming the character shards is certainly noteworthy. It is limited. I would think of it like the Soul Port, except that instead of being on just a timer, it's just a daily quest, which I definitely prefer. As one thing once Tagatame is well and truly gone, the having to manage the port every 12 hours, not going to miss that. Now, the unfortunate thing is you are very limited in how many shards that you can get. And then adding on to this fact is that the global version is trying to catch up to the main overseas version. But because there's less time, so we have less time to get the units to higher star levels. But for right now, as you may have guessed from the previous summoning section, Saffiyah and Inanna are definitely going to be part of this lineup. And then Dantalion, to be honest, I don't think his 5-star is even that good. I want that Ascended skin. So Dantalion's going to be in here until I get that. And then Alexi, on the other hand, I think his star leveling up is really good. So I'll probably swap Inanna out, possibly at least once I get her up, because I get every legendary to 2 stars minimum. But Dantalion, Alexi, and Saffiyah are probably going to be here for the long haul. If I did end up getting Auguste, he could be the 4th person. That really just depends on how my lineup changes, because you basically have a number of shards that you can get based on the level itself. In this case, that's going to be 8. I think that the max is 9 once you get to rank 60. And then that gets divided among the units. But also, the maximum you can get for any individual character is also 3. So you could just only run 3 characters and get 3. In the case of this, I have 4 characters, so everybody's getting 2 per day. That works for me. I'd rather have that than have 3 characters and one person just gets the extra shard. Let's go ahead and almost take that guy out. So each level is the same, but the lineup overall changes a little bit, so you're not always getting the same enemies every time, but overall the flow of the battle isn't going to have too much variety. You could probably auto this, but in general, I don't really auto in this game. Usually it's inefficient at worst and inefficient at best, and then just straight up suicidal at worst. The AI can be very bad in this game, which is, it's a tactical game, so marketing itself on being an idle game would be kind of silly, but definitely the ability to auto content is something that can be good for basically for whales or people who want to invest a ton in the game and just throw everything that they've got at it and then just let the auto do its work and basically just brute force the content. That's not my style, but sometimes in the game, like say Star Rail, that can be a really nice thing just because it will keep the game alive, if nothing else. All right, let's see if we can finish up this battle in the next round. I think we'll do that by overclocking Dantalion. Most animations in this game are just kind of meh, and then every once in a while it'll get really cinematic. Usually a character will have a signature move. That was Inanna's, and we could just throw Dantalion's signature in there too. It's one of my favorite animations in the game. Coming from Tagatame, that might not look like much, but I do enjoy the pixel art in this game quite a bit. Okay, now we're going to use a tactic, because we want to get him a little closer to the enemy. That is something that's really fun. I think Tagatame flirted with this idea a little bit, like when like the character swapping that you could do in very specific maps, but it never really had something like that where an equipable mechanic that you can use to that has its own point system that you can help you win at a map. There's quite a few of them. I think Maneuver Command by far is the best one in the entire game, but I enjoy that sense of variety. So there we go. So we got some shards of the characters. Saffiyah, I just got to 2 stars, and then Alexi's going to be a while because I just got 3. Then Dentalian, on the other hand, this week I'm going to have him at 4, which will be pretty fun. And Inanna, tomorrow I'll have her at 2. So that is the slowest thing. Like, if you're measuring individual actions in doing the dailies, the memory retrieval will always be the slowest thing. Pretty much everything else you can skip ticket. Like, for example, the weaponry trial, you can potentially get legendary weapons from here, which is nice. I haven't done this one yet. I want to get the gear engraving and maybe get my units to level 60 before I do that one. I know it's certainly possible to do now, but the weaker you are when you attempt these bosses, the more perfectly micromanaged you have to be, and you have to make sure that you can clear a fairly noticeable DPS check, because there's a lot more DPS checks in this game than something like Tagatame. So for right now, we're just going to throw a skip ticket at this and see what we get. The biggest complaint I have in the entire game is that the skip ticket items and the stamina items have time limited. Basically, from the moment you get them, they'll last like 2 weeks and then they expire. I don't like that. I think that's unnecessary. I know it's to try and keep people engaged with the game, but I'm not sure how effective that really is. Because like I ended up having like 20 of those items that ended up going to waste just because I would have needed to burn a ton of AP, and I have like a huge amount of skip tickets, a low amount of AP items, and like that balance makes it so there's just not much I could do. It didn't, even though they do have an event where you can farm a ton of rank up materials, it still wasn't worth it to burn that much AP on it. You do get some from logging in at random times, but it's not always convenient. So that overall, that's probably the biggest complaint that I have. It would be much, much nicer if you could just have them and not worry about it. Because it's one of those things, like, I definitely will put the time in at some point. It can't always be divided evenly among a set period of time. Like, it's entirely possible that I might throw like maybe 3 hours in a single day, but it might not happen until like say 3 weeks from now. And if that's the case, then there's certainly opportunity lost. So let's see, we've got all of these. You want to do at least 5 usually if you're going for the fastest possible clear for dailies. You could also do the clash, which is like the PvP against auto enemies, like the equivalent of the arena. Unlike the arena in Tagatame, that one is manual, like for your units. And it's really easy to, if you do the easy run a few times, you can get the rewards, and it's fairly low hassle. I'm not going to showcase that here just because we're using enough time as it is. Generally, the way that this works is that there's one specific one that's going to be like extra rewards. And then on Sundays, it's all of them. So if you're ever going to do extra farming, Sundays is the best day to do that. We'll go ahead and throw the XP in there too. Oh, except we are almost out. But this is I got 8 of these things and they're going to expire in 5 days. So at this point, I'm incentivized to throw one of these here. So the Fool's Journey and the just regular farming levels are where most of the stamina is going to end up going. So unlike Tagatame, you do actually have to consider your stamina usage because you can be in a position where you run out. And I don't think there are non-expiring versions. It's just they're exceptionally rare. So most of the time you get a stamina item, it's going to be expiring. So let's see where that got us. If we're not quite there yet as far as the dailies go, we're just going to move on. I'm going to talk about banners and stuff. But I just wanted to give a general feel for what that core experience is like. Because if you're going to be playing this game, that what I just did is going to be a very common experience as far as the day-to-day. But as you can see, with relatively minimal effort, we got all the dailies done. And then a little bit later on in the day, we can get some more stamina from that. What I would do assuming I was going to play the game anymore today after I'm done making this video, which in all honesty, probably not, but I'd just throw it all into the Fool's Journey and just try to get closer and closer to that gear engraving stage. And finally, that last one. So yeah, that is overall. Oh, you know what? Let me show my case my units real quick. We saw the ones that I use for memory retrieval, but this is my main lineup as far as there's 12 that I need to raise for the Voyage Memento. And then I make sure to have 2 of each type. And if you do that, then you're pretty much set. The lineup has changed a little bit as I've acquired new units. Like as you can see, Saffiyah and Nana have risen up very, very quickly. I was saving a lot of resources for Saffiyah specifically, and I happen to have a little bit extra I could use on Inanna, even though I've got way too many watchers. Edda is down here somewhere, so I'm not looking for any new watchers anytime soon. Breakers are what I'm definitely going to be after. Luckily, there's going to be some nice breakers coming up in the future, including the very next limited character is going to be Auguste, so I will definitely throw some gems at him. If I don't get him, no worries, but if I do, he'll be a very welcome addition to the team. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the summon screen, and I'll talk about my take on the banners. Okay, so we are at the summon screen, and if I'm remembering correctly, my last video, I was definitely getting down on the gacha, as far as, I think it was even in the title of the video. And since then, my perspective is definitely lightened up a little bit. But it does come with a condition, because I think I was thinking about the gacha holistically at the time, and now I've shifted to a very narrow focus. So now I'm not going to assume what works for me is going to work for you, but my philosophy is that gems are for the debut banner and only for the debut banner, just because you don't get a lot of them. I think you get enough to guarantee the characters that you want if you really focus, but that's about it. And then you may need to skip certain banners depending on what your needs are for certain roles or certain abilities to do certain things, or just characters you really like. I mean, honestly, even if Saffiyah was just considered an okay character like the way Alexi is, I'd still get her anyway. She's just one of my favorite characters in the game, just in pretty much any metric that you use. So yeah, I only spend gems on the debut banner. I have not pulled on any of the double banners at all. I've ended up getting characters that were on them just on the debut banner, and I think that's one of the main flaws in that system, is just that you could, like, say you really want Nungle, right? You spend a bunch of gems, you get Nurgle instead, and then you spent a bunch of them, then moving on to a debut banner for another character you want to get, and then the first 5-star you get is Nungle, and it just seems... It seems unfortunate. It seems unnecessary. But I will say that there is one exception that I would make for the double banner, and that is if I get to choose who the characters are. I heard that, I don't know if it was like an anniversary, a half anniversary, something like that, in I think it was the Taiwan version, or maybe just CN version, I'm not sure which, but somebody somewhere far away a long time ago had a version of the double banner where you got to select the 2. I don't know what the range of characters was, but odds are by the time, if we get one of those, by the time that happens, that you could think of 2 characters that you could really benefit from having. And if you want both of them equally, then suddenly that could be worth it. But as long as we can't choose which characters they are, and they're just characters that you could just get randomly, then it's not for me. And then the other banners are not even, like the standard ones are not even worth talking about. They're just, as long as they use the same type of currency, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just, I just have that really narrow focus. Just debut banner. If it's a character I really want, I'll go for them. If not, then I skip. And that's pretty much it. It's not an amazing system by any stretch. I don't even know if such a thing really exists, right? Like, I think if it's a gacha system, it has to be like, probably at best perfectly balanced between upsides and downsides, and then usually it only gets worse from there. But I will say the game's commitment to maintaining its rates is commendable. Like, I'm, going to be a little bit of an outlier here because, or not an outlier, but like a little farther away from the mean. But as far as I understand it, I think that it does actually cap at 2%. So I think you will get a legendary if you were in a position where that pull would have put you at a rate below 2%, I think that's pretty cool, because like Tagatame did not. Like sometimes those rates seemed like an absolute lie. Like in instances where like it's a 2.5% base chance and like I'm at like a quarter that amount on a set of runs with a sample size of like, approaching 200, and that's not great. So actually being 2% and sticking with it, that's definitely cool. So that's all I've really got to say about the banners. So the last thing I want to do is just close out the video, just showcase a map fighting some guys, and just talk about a more miscellaneous collection of thoughts, things that didn't really fit into any of the previous categories, including some concerns that I have about the game. Okay, so on to my complaints and concerns. There's a lot of things that I want to talk about. So the point here is not to be negative. I do really enjoy this game. I think it's built on a very solid foundation, but it is not perfect. Also unrelated, but I have since unlocked gear engraving. But I'll talk about that more in a future video. So the main thing is, I feel like this game often is at odds with itself about what it wants to be. Like, on the one hand, it is a very free-to-play friendly experience as far as lower rarity characters are often perfectly viable. You don't need to pull for dupes. There's no like signature weapons. Well, yet anyway. I've heard that's going to be a thing later. I hope that doesn't mess the experience up too much. But on the downside of all of that, there's really not as good of incentives to be a whale as other gacha games would have. Like if we compare to the games that I've talked about on my channel, like compared to Tagatame, new character plus new memento. If you want to get that every time, you have to be a whale. Or Star Rail or Genshin, they have C6 or E6, either way. And then they also have limited weapons, which then they could get dupes of. So if somebody really wanted a whale, they could. I don't think that would be good in this game, just because there is live PvP, and there's also the auto arena. So if you're constantly forced to go up against people who spent like an absurd amount of money basically to buy damage, I don't think it would work as well in this game. But there are things that they could do. Like one thing that I wish they would do is have more things available for the premium currency. Like say if they had a tarot shop where you could get a tarot, and maybe it costs like 110 pull, but it would be guaranteed to have the final substat that alters the passive. Something like that. I mean, if I was a whale and I was trying to get a really good devil character, or a character who wants devil, and I'm trying to get that passive upgrade, and every single one I do just doesn't get it, and that's really frustrating. But I could spend a little bit of money, get a tarot that has that passive, and I don't have to think about it anymore. Something like that I think would be helpful without ruining the balance of the game. Or maybe just do more skins. There were 2 paid skins at the start of the game, and we haven't seen any since. That's another thing. Especially if it's anything cosmetic, that's always good, just because people can spend and it doesn't actually affect the gameplay. That's kind of the best case scenario. And then there's also the issue of just evaluation. I think that the battle pass is just not worthy enough to spend money on. I just don't think that works. I think they would need to upgrade it in order for me to be able to endorse it. So overall, I just don't think that they have the monetization figured out. The other thing I don't think that they have figured out is how they want this game, or who they want this game to appeal to. Is like, do you want to be hardcore? Do you want to be casual? Do you want to be the kind of game that's like, this is the game that can be your only game, like a Final Fantasy XIV or a Genshin Impact? But then also they want it to be just like a more casual, friendly thing. And it's like, you can't be both of those things at once. Like you can be do your dailies, pop in, pop out, chip away, maybe at the main story, something like that. But then there's also like 3 events going on, and some of those events get quite challenging. There was one instance where I was doing an event, and previously, because I think at the time I was in the late 40s, now I'm in the late 50s, so I'm almost max, so this won't be an issue much longer. But it actually, like, it scaled down the difficulty a little bit just because my account level wasn't there yet. And then in a more recent event, it didn't do that, so I was like not even 55 yet, and it's forcing me to fight level 60 enemies. And this was just something that you did to farm a currency for reward. So it's like I could have just done the next one down, but it still doesn't feel good because you get a quest achievement with more of that shop's currency for completing all of the stages. So I had to like basically work on my account a bit, get to 55 and do as many upgrades as I possibly could just to be able to clear that. And that did end up making the difference, but I don't understand why in one case it was willing to sync and in another case it wasn't willing to sync. I think that's a little weird. So at least this is kind of funny, but like at least it's not a game that's lacking for content. I've heard people say there's nothing to do in this game, and there might have been a spot where it was light on events, but now they're really just throwing events at us left and right, to the point where it's easy to say there's actually too much going on. Some of those events are pretty fast, so I don't have a big problem with that. The only issue that I have is with how the stamina system works. Like, it's weird to me that they have an event come out that you consume stamina at the end of it, and it's pretty solid. I like the Voyage of Discovery just overall. I don't have a lot of complaints about it, but you do the levels and then you consume stamina to get the rewards, and I think there's a reasonable amount of stamina. But at the same time, they have, hey, you can basically farm these material levels as much as you want, because we changed the extra reward redeem from 1 to 100. And it's like, okay, well, I can't do both of these things. So I now have to choose, do I want to get more rank up materials or do I want to get more just of everything? And there's also just not that much stamina in the game. So it's really hard to make use of that. They really throw the skip ticket items at you, and as long as you're able to use them before they expire, but they really do not do the same with the stamina items. So I don't know if this will be like a Tagatame experience where at the beginning it is something that you do have to think about and manage, and then eventually they throw so much at you that you never have to think about it again. That's what happened to me in both versions of Tagatame. So I don't know if that's going to be here, but right now it doesn't feel very good because there's always more things that I could be spending stamina on, but because I either have like none left of the expiring, or I only have a few, so I want to save them for maybe I'm really close to finishing Fool's Journey, so I want to make sure I have a couple of those potions so I can finish out the chapter, something like that. And then I have like maybe 7 total of the non-expiring, and just the fact that they expire at all, I already complained about that. It feels like a big jumbled mess to me, as far as like being casual, being hardcore. And then also Spiral of Destinies, while I don't have a lot of complaints about it, it's trying to go for that just regular kind of console slash handheld game that's not live service feel. But I do feel like the experience suffers a bit because it is a live service gacha. Like, there's certain characters where, like Samantha in the Papal Route, where it's just, I would just expect her to join the party. The story is basically about her and that journey, but instead she's just an NPC most of the time and occasionally joins your party as a playable ally. But you have zero control over her build, etc. I think a system more like Fire Emblem Three Houses, where it's like, hey, these are your core units for this run in this route, and now you can run wild with how you build them. I think that would make a lot more sense. Again, this is a nitpick, but that lack of identity of like live service gacha that's trying to be more like a traditional console game, that was ultimately what tore apart Aster Tarticus. So it's always going to be something that's on my mind. Okay, I am done complaining. In general, the summary of this video is that at almost 3 months in the game, I'm enjoying it quite a bit. It's not a perfect replacement for Tagatame because it's different, but it's still the kind of thing that I enjoy. And as somebody who's really loved both Final Fantasy Tactics and the Tactics Ogre franchise, definitely gets my endorsement. So yeah, if you are playing sort of Convallaria, then I wish you good luck and good fun. If you're not playing yet, maybe you'll start once Tagatame has its final day. But until then, I will see you all next time.